Do you guys want to hear what happened with the Israel trip and the drama behind that? Because I don't think Destiny or Lonerbox have talked about it publicly. Okay, so right from the get-go with like the Israel trip, Lonerbox and Destiny wanted me to come. And even though I haven't been upfront as a streamer, I've been kind of doing things behind the scenes. I have been the crypto Jew, okay? You know, like behind the scenes. I am still friends with lots of the people in the scene, and I would help people with research. Lonerbox and I particularly had a lot of talks where we would research together, would show each other things. I had another little research group that we were working on things together. So, so I still was very much like helping people out with certain things, right? And a part of it. And so, and for those who don't know, I'm an Israeli citizen. And unfortunately, Israel does not pay me to advocate for them. They should, because their shit sucks. So if you're a representative of the Israeli government, please send me some money. Thank you. But basically, I was supposed to go on the trip. There was a lot of anxiety about the logistics of the trip without an Israeli citizen, like within the group. And particularly, there was an anxiety for Lonerbox landing in Israel. And because his ancestry is Lebanese. And I mean, Israel's basically at war with Lebanon. So there was just like a lot of anxiety associated with that. Now, there were some logistical issues associated with it. So like there was like a plan that I was going to fly to Heathrow in London, and then I'd meet Lonerbox there, and then we'd probably fly together and maybe meet Destiny there. But the whole thing ended up becoming a nightmare to orchestrate, and I think it also was only going to work. I really believe that we should go with an organization, right? Like that, there were some just like differences on how we were going to like plan this trip. So I believe that we should go with an organization, and I had a variety of reasons for that, right? So an organization could make sure that everyone's visas and everyone's shit and like that was orchestrated and organized, which in Israel, if you don't know, like the security and all of that can be hell. Number two, security, right? An organization would fund and keep good security, and they would know where we need to use good security, where it's not as important, because there were lots of plans to go into, maybe Arab villages or the West Bank or just walking around as like, I mean, Desi's really fucking hated, man. Like, I was terrified of people just wanting to fucking kill us. So, there was a lot there. And so I thought that I felt like they were being a little naive about the security situation in the country, because it's way more dangerous for a group of us than for just some random Israeli, because like there's a bunch of really big streamers and well-known public figures. Destiny is particularly hated in a lot of crowds, and they could become a target very easily, especially if you're not careful with what location you're saying, like where you are and all that kind of stuff. Lonerbox has been trying to radio on YouTube, but you need to turn it on or some shit. How do I turn that on? Oh, he just... Okay, let me fix this. I like how I'm shitting on him and he's rating me. This is fucking hilarious. Okay. Let me organize this. So YouTube Studio. Settings. I don't know what those notifications are. Okay, YouTube Studio. Settings. community, specific channels, who can redirect my content. Oh, okay, loaner box. Okay, you send them manually? Okay. It's okay. I fixed it now, so it's all sorted now. But thank you, loaner box rumors. I'm shitting on loaner box right now. So it's perfect. Perfect timing. Anyways, so welcome all you loanies. What do you guys call loaner box community? Loaner boxes? Boxers? I think loanies is probably the best one. But yeah, anyways, mid-story. So, boners. Okay, I should have thought of that. I should have thought of that. Okay. So yeah, so there were some disagreements there. And also because we're a mixed group, we kind of had like all the targets. Okay. So on one hand, so we've got Destiny, who's extremely hated, controversial streamer, right? And thank you so much for subscribing. And then number 2, we've got Loanerbox, who's an Arab, right? And people can be really racist in Israel. And he's not even like a Muslim Arab. He's like a Maronite. So he still will experience shit from Muslims. So it's like there's a bunch of areas that he would be in danger from. And then on top of that, I'm Israeli and Jewish. So that means that I'm in danger in all the Arab neighborhoods. So it kind of like, there were just a lot of, the group was like target, to me in my mind. And I guess you could say I was paranoid, but to me in my mind, it was a dangerous situation. Just like waiting. Because it's like, even if it's a 10% chance, it's still, all you need is 1, right? Domestica, thank you so much for subscribing. Tier 1, thank you. But you're not allowed to subscribe. I've told everyone here, you're not allowed to subscribe. So it's banned. In what way is Desi controversial? I mean, the fact that he's so pro-Israel in a pretty lefty space, and I mean, he's also not careful with his words, and he sometimes says like shit that's a little inappropriate on Twitter. But anyways, so that's kind of like how Loanerbox almost got married during the Israel visit. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Israeli women are hot. I warned him. But anyways, so I was concerned about security, and I felt like if we went with an organization, it would be much easier. And on top of that, there's a huge lack of manpower with security right now in Israel, because all the reservists have been called in because Israel's at war, right? And it's a very tiny country, so all the reservists have been called in. So it's actually way more expensive and way more hard to get security right now. Because they're like, you call them up and they're like, oh, you think we have men? We don't have any men. What do you mean? They're in Gaza. You know, like it's not going to happen. So I felt like it was so much better to just go with an organization and have them handle this stuff for us, because this is what they fucking do. And Destiny had some issues with going with an organization. And I also think that those issues are very legitimate. So Nad's not paranoid at all. Yeah. Well, the thing is that like I'm from the Middle East, so I felt like the two of them were being a little naive about what it's like there. Because it's easy to, you don't understand that like this idea that you go into a neighborhood that you're not supposed to be in, and people are gonna look at you weird, right? And when they look at you weird, it's actually a dangerous thing. Like it's like, how did I know if I was going to go into a certain neighborhood and I'd be like fucking taken hostage? Okay. Like, I don't know. So, just use your feminine wills to get Destiny to go. So, but yeah, Destiny had some issues with going on with an organization. I think like the biggest issue with going with an org, was the balance, was the fact that almost every org that we would go with would most likely be a very pro-Israel and consequently quite right-wing organization. And he was worried that, number one, if I remember correctly, I might be wrong on this, but this is if I remember correctly from what I heard from Lunarbox. He was concerned, number one, that would kind of affect the credibility of the trip, because Dusty is very willing to criticize Israel where he thinks it's warranted. He didn't want to be in a situation where everyone was just assuming that any of his opinions were because an organization had paid and organized the trip, and it was just a propaganda trip. So that was, I think, a huge focus for him. And an organization would probably control some aspects. Like maybe they wouldn't let us go talk to a group, or they'd heavily discourage it. I didn't think that would happen, but he was concerned about that. And that was valid. Hey, Almasant. Everyone knows DGG's slogan is fair and balanced. You know what? I could see myself renting a car in Israel. Does gifting subs help? Usually only on YouTube. I don't think you can gift subs on YouTube. I don't even know how YouTube works, guys. I'm so new to it. I need to learn. I asked Lonerbox to help me today. He's like, I'm streaming. So, yeah. Yeah, he was worried that an organization would affect the credibility. And to me, it's like, the way I weighed it was, I felt like we could stand up to that org. And I felt like they would still like us because they would still think we were overall doing something good, like humanizing Israelis and all that kind of stuff. But I think like he had the money, he wanted to pay for it himself, he wanted to organize it himself. Now, with him paying for the trip, that becomes a lot more challenging. Like with funding everyone to go, and I think he ends up spending $40,000 or something crazy. It was a lot of fucking money. Yeah, so there's a lot. Now the Haredis will be going to IDF. I think it's all about time. Yeah. So I think like the combination of that made the trip a challenge. And I think like that made it really hard. And I was concerned about going without an organization. And the timing just ended up being hell because I didn't have my passport sorted. I mentioned that. So I didn't have my passport sorted. And there were just too many negatives for me to be able to go. So I ended up not going. And yeah, I'm fucking mad I didn't go. And yes, I'm very jealous. And yes, I hate them. Because they had a great time. So yeah, fuck them. And they didn't end up getting killed. So it was all for nothing. But Lonerbox and I have been talking about going there again together. And it would be useful. I mean, I could speak Hebrew. I mean, my Hebrew's not like amazing, but it works. And no, I didn't. I never did Birthright. But yeah, we've been thinking about going there together and doing more of like I guess, talking to like the normal people type trip, like where we literally just go talk to people. My Arabic sucks, so we would need like an Arabic translator if someone doesn't speak English or Hebrew. But I think that could be really special. And if I come back to streaming, I'm definitely going to do that. I think that would be really cool. Yes, I am single now. If they died, you would have felt vindicated. Yeah. But, you know, I do like them. So I'm especially good friends with Lodenbach, so I don't want him to die. Destiny on the other hand, I don't know. I myself live in Israel and mine still isn't amazing. A time to marry an Israeli tour guide. Wait, are you guys dating? No, I'm single. I told you I'm single. I'm very single. So. Yeah. I just found out that President Sunday made like some kind of tweet about me with Bowman. Bro, I don't keep up with American politics. I don't fucking know who Bowman is. Okay? Is that like that guy that AIPAC like funded to not get back? I don't know. I have no clue if that's him. Link the tweet. I'm not gonna link it. People are always gonna have her being single is why we're here. You know Corey Gilguster, I'm assuming. Yeah, actually, that was a plan. That was someone we were planning on talking to. I don't know if they ended up talking to him. Did they? I haven't watched the content yet. I was going to watch it on stream today and react to some of it. And act really jealous and mad that I didn't go. You're too single. We need to arrange a shit for you. I mean, yeah, that sounds great. So make sure he likes dogs. Um, just curious, would you ever marry a brown Indian man from India who loves Jewish and Israel? I love Jewish women, and yeah, and their white skin. I mean, not all Jewish women have white skin. I hate to break it to you. I do, but I'm not a good representative of them. Um, so, my main requirement to date me is to have a good credit score. No, because my credit score is all right. It's not the best, but oh my god, if you got like 830 credit score, whew, so hot. Do you agree with Desi's current take that Sharon was Israel's best hope for peace? Okay, that's a hard one. I feel like Sharon himself did a lot of, for all the good he did a lot of fucking bad too. So it's hard to say that. Like Sharon was also like kind of like Mr. War Crime. A lot of people forget that. You know, before he gave Gaza up, which I mean was an ethical move, whether or not that was a smart move, that's its own thing. But he, like, I'm telling you, you read about war crimes in Israel, like in history, I swear Sharon was there. Okay? He is like the Where's Waldo of war crimes in Israel. Like, he just shows up. Like, a random, even in areas you don't think he's stationed in. I swear I was reading a story where he's, like, stationed in, like, the Negev. No, where he's stationed up north, and then I'm reading about a war crime in the Negev, and somehow Sharon's there, and I'm like, why are you south? Why are you there? Yeah, it's really weird. Anyways, but that's also when he was younger. You know, we all have a rebel stage. That feels weird to say. Yeah, you could say that Sharon is the reason why we're here with October 7th. But I also think it was brave what Sharon did. So he made a lot of, I think, like making the Kadima party. I think the Kadima party is very cool. So I always loved a party, the idea that you could be like very pro security, but also pro peace, that they work hand in hand, because I always felt like they went hand in hand. I don't think they were such opposing figures like we've been kind of told to be that they are in Israeli politics. And Kadima kind of was like that, which was the party he created. But yeah, but I've got a lot of fucking issues with him, man. So, and he rejected. There were a few other. There was a peace deal that he rejected, right? Tull, something like that. I don't know. I haven't read about this stuff in a long time, so it's is Sharon the eye patch guy? Yeah. It definitely was brave what he did. It didn't contradict the fact that it was a stupid move in hindsight. We couldn't know back then. Well, I think a lot of the arguments people did say we knew. This was predicted by right-wingers. I can tell you that. One of the most upsetting things about October 7th was how much Hamas proved a lot of right-wing Israeli politics correct. Right? Now, they proved a lot of right-wing politics incorrect. Like, obviously, Netanyahu looked like an incompetent idiot. So, it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, that was one of the hard parts about that. It was very hard for me. This is why, like, I almost had like a breakdown that week, because it's like it warped my sense of belief in humans and things that I'd advocated for. Do you know what it was like to watch hostages, friends of my family members and stuff, on videos, like around being stored in areas with bags that have labels on organizations I'd raised money for? That fucked with me. So, I think some of that is that if you predict a terror attack every day, that eventually you're going to get it right. Yeah, that's true. How is it that leftists have ended up so easily falling prey to invoking similar 9/11 style conspiracy theories when they claim because politics is not about ideology. And this has been my true black pill moment. This has been my intense black pill moment, because I realized this the week of October 7th. Because I didn't just get upset about Jew shit. I didn't just get upset about Israel. I got upset about what I was seeing with the online political movement. That, like, I think we have this idea that a certain type of person becomes conservative and a certain type of person becomes left, or like a liberal or left wing or whatever you want to call it. And it's like personality traits. But I really think it's not true. And I think that like, it's not about ideology. It's not about even your personality traits. It's a team sport. Like, I'm telling you, I got into hockey Guys, hockey is the exact same shit. The subreddits operate the same way. If anyone who's into like sports subreddits, they operate the exact same way. People go raid each other's subreddits. They get really fucking upset. You always defend your team, even when your team did something wrong, but then you justify it in your head because you think, oh, well, they did something wrong to justify us being wrong. Yeah, we're not talking about what happened with the Oilers. Okay, I'm still traumatized. So, it's literally just team sports. So the reason why a ton of like all these leftists have been denying rapes and have suddenly stopped caring about women and have suddenly stopped caring about gay people and have suddenly stopped caring about all that is because it is their team sport to be pro-Palestinian no matter what. And the same thing works the other way. The same thing works another way. I will see plenty of people who are extremely pro-Israel, who are suddenly care about rape, and I know that they did not give a shit much about it before. Suddenly they have an issue with it when it's a Palestinian doing it. So it's like, it's just team sports. You know, you only get upset about a high stick in a game, like in a hockey game, when the other team does it. But when your team does it, you're like, no, like that high stick wasn't a big deal because he had actually just got hit this, like you got cross-checked or something, you know? And I think that whole thing, I think it's, a part of me doesn't even blame people to be like that because I think it's very human. It's very human. We are tribalistic and we want to go with our tribe. And so the left is not, you can make, they are not they're anti-colonial, but you could make an anti-colonial argument to be pro-Israel. Like it is, I'm telling you, you could have just flipped a coin and I could hear them making all the same arguments for Israel. Being extremely anti-Palestinian to the point of being racist towards them. Because it's not about ideology. It's literal, it's a mix of moral luck and team sports. Are you a Leafs fan? Yes, I am a Leafs fan. Don't you dare shame me if you're air, okay? You'll get banned. I'm kidding, you won't get banned, but I'll be upset. Like every leftist, I consider myself one good leftist, but unlike every other leftist, I am correct. Yeah. But it's like this idea, I mean, I grew up always being told about all the massacres Israel did. Sorry, Israel, the opposite. All the massacres that the Arabs did against Israel. All the war crimes that happened against us in Israel. Like the Hebron massacre, for example. Something that you really grew up being taught. And I was always taught this narrative, we always want peace, they never want peace, blah, blah, blah. And that's often true. It's not always true. The truth is that a bunch of massacres did happen. As I told you, Ariel Sharon was there for all of them. And, like, the idea that we somehow could not do something like that, like, it goes against our instinct because it's like our team, it's our tribe. We never do that. And the majority of Palestinians support Hamas. They do. The majority of Palestinians support Hamas, 100%. And Hamas supports rape. Does that mean that the majority of Palestinians support rape? No. Because the majority of Palestinians don't believe that Hamas raped. They don't believe that Hamas did not commit, they don't believe that they committed these war crimes, right? They're being propagandized. And on top of that, like, you know, like they are sold a ton of lies. Like, why are they going to believe things on the opposite side? It makes no sense. You almost shouldn't believe on the opposite side because they're at war. They're at war for their own survival from their perspective. So it's that's just unfortunately how humans work. And I think that me accepting that has been a very dark black pill to swallow. I think that's like realizing that it's all aesthetics and shallow things. There's no deep ideology underneath it all. There's no real deep ideological differences between us humans. Like, and I think that's been very depressing. This is why, like, I didn't stream much because it's like I didn't know, like, I'm not really that political anymore. I don't think I ever was extremely political. The killing is often done back and forth. It makes me think, oh yeah, Well, this attitude. There's one of there's this common idea that there's this idea of on October 7th that, oh, October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum, right? You guys heard a ton of leftists say that. October 7th did not happen in a vacuum, right? Okay. Well, Israel's blockade and occupation did not happen in a vacuum. And the war from the Arabs against Israel did not happen in a vacuum. And Israel having to establish a state without the consent of the Arabs did not happen without a vacuum. That's kind of how a conflict works. Okay? None of the shit fucking happens in vacuums. It's tit for tat. It goes back and forth. That's how humans work. It sucks. Congratulations. But when you somehow think that only the shit that happens against the other side is the vacuum, I'm like, oh my God, your hubris. You just happen to think that your side happens to be the best one. Okay. You should have learned that when you were 16. Yeah, I told you I'm very immature for my age. What do you think of Jesse's take in terms of getting peace from the Palestinians? The Palestinian Authority and Abbas is going to be the best bet for Israel to engage with. I mean, I agree with that. Okay, here's the problem, is that the majority of Palestinians don't support Abbas, so they're not legitimate rulers. Maybe the Palestinians need a king. Okay? And then, see, monarchism could fix it. No one ever gets mad at Egypt for their role in the blockade. Curious. Oh, well, that's because no Jews, no news. So, but that's what I mean, is that Egypt and a lot of the surrounding Arab countries all have the same issue. We saw a ton of Arab countries literally shoot down Iranian rockets. Like, they're all technically on the same side of Israel. They're all on the same side of this new Cold War we're in. And, but they're not being targeted, they're not being protested against or anything like that because it doesn't fit within the team sports narrative. And I think that that's extremely, extremely upsetting to see. And it's also very isolating, because one of the things that's helped me a lot is connecting to the Jewish community in Toronto, and connecting to other Jews and stuff like that. That's been very helpful. But one of the problems is that a lot of people within the Jewish community are within the team sports world, and I can't blame them for it, because it's very efficient to operate that way when you're fighting for survival. But it's also depressing. I don't want to have to say all these lines that I just don't genuinely believe in. Palestinians don't want peace. Palestinians they hate. They hate us more than they love their children, or just all the typical line that you're supposed to tote. I hate that that's what I have to do to fight against anti-Semitism. I don't want to tote that line, and I refuse to do it. Thank you so much for, are those subscriptions? I don't know what those are, but thank you. Yeah, I don't want to tote that line. But at the same time, it's I also don't want to be in leftist spaces where I have to be afraid to be Israeli, where I have to somehow act like Jews are not the most oppressed minority right now in the city. And tone down my anxiety and tone down my anger and also my need for survival too. So that sucks. Okay? Obviously I'm a little biased because I'm going to think my opinions are the correct ones. That's why they're my opinions. So when it comes down to a lot of these, I guess, attitudes, I tend to just lean towards I obviously believe that what I believe in is the truth. And the truth is the truth, regardless whether it's convenient for my narrative as an Israeli, as a pro-Israel Israeli. So, and there's a ton of shit that's not convenient. And those things come up in my mind where I'm if you're fighting a war for survival, just think about it. You're literally in a fight. You're in a house, I don't know, you're in this destroyed house and you're fighting against the whites. Say it's blacks versus whites, okay? Not in terms of race, I'm talking about colors and chess, okay? And you're in this fight. Are you gonna if you're fighting for survival and you're like making sure to try to get a shot on them before they get a shot on you, it's like them or you, are you going to kind of step back and be like, hey, I just want to let you know that the gun that I'm using is actually way more powerful than your gun. And I feel like that sets up a really problematic power dynamic here. And this is not a fair fight. No, you're not thinking that way. And you shouldn't think that way. You're thinking about survival. So like, there's this cross where it's like, do I think like an academic here? Or should I be thinking about my family surviving? Should I think about my country getting destroyed? Like, what should be my priority? If I talk all the time about the mistakes that Israel's making in this war, am I just contributing to this unfair demonization of the country? Even if those mistakes are horrific, and even if there are horrible things that are said. It's a tough thing to know how to navigate properly. Repost by Oleg. I spoke to a Japanese friend about how Japan used to be an extremist state with the political religious ideology Shintoism caused people to commit Shahid-style suicide bombing. For those who don't know, Shahid is when you sacrifice yourself in Islam for like a jihad, right? So it's kind of like being like a martyr. I think if Japan can recover and become more progressive, then there's hope for Israel and Palestinians. Yeah, I mean, I agree, but obviously extremely different situation. Once it becomes good versus evil, you can no longer consider compromise. And it's like, that's the tough thing. It's not even that you can be pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, but when the bias is too much to the point that you dehumanize or don't even bother to understand the other group's issue, it's a problem. Oh, yeah. That's definitely how I felt the first week of October 7th. Like, I was like, oh my God, I was furious. Like, for example, most of these leftists don't even try and understand Israel as a country. Yeah, they completely dehumanize Israel. And this is where I think that it's something that you just see happen to Israel and you don't see it happen to other countries that engage in problematic shit. Arabs just need to start making anime. Do you think it's anime that helped Japan, or do you think it's their wacky porn? I'm in my breeding era, so I think it's their wacky porn. Yeah, I hate it when people try to bring up power imbalances in Israel, whereas if somehow there's like a moral state. Yeah, and also the power imbalance is just a matter of perspective. Like, when it comes to Israel and Palestinians, sure, but Israel and Arab countries, or the countries that are funding Palestine, Israel and the UN, Jews as a population, it's like, power balance is all about perspective. Thank you so much for the £5, MOBA. Eris, are you back for a long time now? Loved your cameos on other streams. Oh, thank you. I would like to go on some other people's streams and see how that is. I don't know if I'm fully back. It all depends on if I get a place. If I get the right place and I'm able to set up, then I'd love to come back, but I don't want to commit because as a student of history, I have failed in that. So how much hentai do you watch? I don't watch hentai, okay? Never. I am a very good person. I would never watch something so vile and degenerate. You know, I read my Harry Potter smut fanfiction, okay? So, you know, Japan only changed over time because of the democracy and economic growth. You think your fanfic is bad, Eris? Imagine what they got in Japan. Okay, I have seen what they got in Japan. Don't worry. I do not have to imagine stolen. Don't worry. I think power balances are a tough thing. The left likes to pretend that power balances are very simple, because that's their whole line, right? They're like, oh, it's simple. It's a simple issue. Their lie is that it's complicated. Power balances, like, let's look at like relationships, because this is the big topic that everyone talks about. So there's an obvious power dynamic where, say, one person is a streamer and the other person is a fan. So I've told Destiny you shouldn't fuck your fans, right? The thing is that there's a lot of other power dynamics that can come into play. Like, what if that fan is very rich, like richer than Destiny? Like, they're like a billionaire. Like, what if the fan is Mark Cuban, okay, or Donald Trump? Then there's a different power. What if that fan is much older? What if that fan is way more smarter, like much more intelligent? What if the fan is hotter? Because being hotter in a relationship also gives you more power. There are so many other like elements of these power dynamics that can like balance out that it's very, this is one of the reasons why I don't like judging these things unless it's like outright illegal, obviously. Because there's a lot of complexities to power dynamics. just as there are in politics. Could you elaborate on why you consider Israel's constant targeting of civilians and societal infrastructure? Like, any time that Israel has been proven to target that, in the rare cases I've completely thought that that was deplorable. To be honest, even if they don't target, I still think it's deplorable. I don't think, I don't want one Palestinian civilian being killed. There is just a huge problem with being able to measure and track this kind of stuff because of the misinformation being spread by Hamas. I don't know. The number might be higher, and the number might be lower. But yeah, I obviously am against any Palestinian civilian dying, or losing their home, or just any shit that happens. Honestly, if a fan is a cute girl, at some point Destiny is totally helpless. Yeah. Just, the joke that I heard Friday night had to do the water. Remember that joke that upset me? Oleg, it's okay. Thank you so much for checking out the stream. So, the joke that I heard Friday night was they were so grateful that their neighbor, their Jewish neighbor, was not a Zionist, because otherwise they would be trying to steal their water and their land. Everyone laughed at that. Mentioned literally Jewish neighbor. So, yeah. They also talked about how they loved how Macklemore, the worst part about the Gaza conflict was that Macklemore was now their favorite rapper, and he's white. And just a reminder, Macklemore is the guy that put on a Jewish like a Jewish fake nose, and dressed as an Orthodox Jew to sing the song Thrift Shop. You should want to reduce the power level of terrorist groups. Yeah, I mean, I agree. What do you think about Destiny's opinion about Islam not being the major factor in the conflict, even though Jew hatred stems from the Quran? Okay. The Quran, I actually have done a lot of research on this topic, believe it or not. So I did a lot of religious reading after October 7th. Jewish and Muslim religious reading. Now, the Quran is a mixed bag with Jews, because Muhammad historically was a mixed bag with Jews. He kind of liked Jews initially, and then he changed his mind on them. So this is one of the reasons why if you read the Quran, there's a lot of nice things about Jews, and there's a lot of I do think that there is some anti-Semitism that stems from, that can go back to the Quran, for sure. But I also, and I do think that religion plays a larger role than he's probably giving it credit for. I used to kind of agree with him, because both Destiny and I are not religious. And when you're not a religious person, it's very easy, if you've got some empathy and stuff, it's very easy to project that onto the world, or it's very hard to get into the religious mindset. You're because you kind of have this instinct thinking, oh, it's just like an aesthetic, or they believe in God, but it's in this very subtle kind of way. It's not like you literally are not afraid to kill yourself because you literally think you're going to go to heaven right away. And how that would change your mindset in how you operate. How it would change your mindset if you think an entire land is given to you by God, when it comes to making peace concessions. So religion does play a role, and it's playing a larger, I would say that it didn't really play a role historically. Ironically, I think it plays more of a role today. And there's a lot of reasons. First of all, the Palestinian rights movement has become very religious. Right? Originally, it was the peace movement within Palestinians that was the religious one. Hamas, the pre-Hamas organization, was religious, and on that basis, it was nonviolent. And it was the non-religious side of those movements that was much more violent. Now there's been a swap. So kind of can feel just like aesthetics. And with Jewish stuff, originally the religious Jewish populations were mostly against the formation of the state of Israel, not because they cared about Palestinians, not because they thought it was unethical, but because they thought that we had to wait for the Messiah, for God to give us the entire country, including Judea and Samaria and all the areas that are in the Bible. And that's its own thing. That's its own thing. That's why you have the Nerede Carta that are still against the formation of Israel. I don't like calling these groups anti-Zionist because that means people misunderstand to think that they don't believe in the country of Israel and they don't believe Israel belongs to the Jews or something like that, because that's not true. They do. They do more so than Zionists. So that can be very confusing for people who are kind of outside of this conflict. That's something, if I ever want to make a video, that's probably something to do. But when it comes to Jews and like religious Jews, historically were not very a part of the original formation of the conflict. It was mostly non-religious Jews. So it was much more of like a human rights issue. It was like a national issue. So he's very right historically, I think. But I think today it's different. Today we now have things like religious Zionism, which is very popular in Israel, where religious people have changed their mind on Israel and have now become mostly very pro-Israel. And religious Jews. And on the other hand, Hamas and the very pro-Palestinian movement is extremely, extremely Islamic. There's some exceptions to that with like the PFLP and like some communists and stuff like that, but overall it's still quite communist. Sorry, it's still quite Muslim. Harundo, thank you so much for subscribing. And that amplifies the conflict, right? So it means that instead of like a typical war effort, you'll get something like a suicide bombing or like a suicide stabbing, because, you know, a specific interpretation of Islam can enable that. And the same way specific interpretations of Judaism can enable their own shit. Not saying it's on an equal level or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain that the religion plays more of a role today than it did historically. And then on top of that, the main reason that I would say the majority of the Arab world is anti-Israel is because of Islam. Like, it's because of Muslim Brotherhood and all that kind of stuff. That's just natural. It's tribalistic. And there's also some ideological aspects to do with Islamic law and war. So there's a specific term, I was hearing about this from a historian, but there's a specific term that in Islam where the world is divided into two, because Islam sees itself, oh God, I could do a whole video on this, because actually I love Islam a lot. I have like a love-hate relationship with it, you know, because like I love and respect it in a lot of ways, kind of like the Roman Empire, but then I've got lots of issues. And keep in mind, there's so many interpretations of Islam that this doesn't really apply to all Muslims, or even all Islamic ideologies. Okay, Adek, thank you so much for tuning in. But yeah, so they kind of divide the world into two, right? So there's and the specific Arab term, I forget exact Arabic term, but it's basically the war that's being fought and the war that's going to be fought. We have to remember, primarily, Muhammad was a commander. He was a general. He was an extraordinary general. He was very, it's one of the coolest things about him. Like, I mean, I love military history, so I think that's cool about him. A lot of people don't. So the world is divided that way. And Islam kind of came about in a time, and it sees itself as a progressive movement in its ideology. It's not a coincidence that it's the number 3 when it comes to the Abrahamic religions. It's the third. It likes being the third. The Progressive American, thank you so much for super chatting, $5. And so it likes being the third because it feels like that makes it progressive, that it is the most technologically superior, and they've got a lot of fucking good reason to feel that way historically. That like originally, and this is a pretty common mindset that you'll see historically, that before the tribes that were kind of dominating and the cultures that were dominating in Saudi Arabia before Muhammad were seen as barbaric, right? I'm not calling them that. I don't know enough about it, whether or not that's true. Okay, there's a lot of issues with the term barbaric, but they were seen as barbaric, and they were seen as regressive, as chaos. And Islam is like, you've got this kind of scholarly, like general, like philosopher general, who's also a prophet, and he's going to come and he's going to clean everyone. I don't know what other word to use, but like it's like literally fix everyone. Like he's the grand fixer. And so and if there are any Muslims in chat, feel free to correct me. I know that there's some like debate on some of this stuff, but I'm pretty sure that this is a pretty common historical mindset. I'm not sure if this is a mindset right now. But this idea of Islam civilizing this land of chaos. And there's probably some good reasons why they felt that way, right? Like, keep in mind, when Islam takes over a lot of these regions, a lot of these original tribal warfare, they kind of like unite all these fighting tribes under one leadership, because originally the empires were all like kind of combined. And so Islam exemplified, say, like scholarly attitudes. It also had a lot of rules on cleanliness, which was a huge aspect. That's like to this day, this is a very core part of Islam, is like washing your hands regularly, not touching things that are considered dirty, like dogs. And so because of that, it all contributes to this idea of like Islam civilizing this barbaric world. That was so barbaric before Islam. Now, there are some societies that are seen as less barbaric, and those are people of the book, so like Christians, Jews, etc. But I think that this is why that ideology kind of divides the world into two that way. And keep in mind, if you see the world that way, and a lot of us in the West identify with that because we're kind of raised in a very similar mindset of seeing Western society as progressive, as ideologically and technologically superior, and all these things. I'm not saying whether or not that's true. I'm just saying that that's how it's seen. And it's a very similar mindset. Islam and Christianity are not so different from one each other. I just like Western society and Islamic society are actually quite similar. And so this idea that like the world has been conquered and it's being cleansed and it's progressive now and it's superior and all these things, and then there's the world that still needs to be conquered. And I don't think the majority of Muslims see the world this way. I have no clue, like today, like there's so many different interpretations of this stuff, like all this is just like a historical thing. And wait, were those just from Judaism? Yeah. Oh yeah, it's 100%. A lot of it was borrowed from Judaism. Which is why they consider Jews much more clean and everything. So, and keep in mind that allows for only two types of countries, right, or nations: a Muslim country or a country that's not Muslim but will become Muslim. Now, there's one type of country that does not fit into that at all, into that mindset, and that's a country that was Muslim that is no longer Muslim. Now, keep in mind that destroys the entire ideology and the entire mindset, because now Islam is regressive, not progressive. That's not how things were supposed to work. It's kind of like the same way that we've in the West like experienced, or just like when we see anti-Semitism, the fact that we were supposed to be over anti-Semitism and now anti-Semitism's come back. That's not, it warps our mind. It's like, that's not, we as humans have always been taught to see history in this like tautological, like upwards trajectory, constantly progressing upwards. That's not how it often works. And it's a very similar thing in that kind of mindset. And so the idea of a country, aka Palestine, which was not originally Muslim, it was conquered by the Muslims. It was taken back occasionally during the Crusades, and then it was taken back successfully again, and then basically kept Muslim for a long time by the Turks. The idea of that going back to not being Muslim, that's very upsetting for that old, very traditional mindset for people who subscribe for that. And I think that you need to understand that mindset, and when I say respect it, I don't mean you think it's a good thing, but I mean by respect it is you truly understand how much of an impact and you understand the history of why they feel that way, to absorb the mindset of some of the very radical Islamic anti-Israel kind of stuff that you're seeing in the Muslim world right now. Like, you've got to, especially with groups like Hamas or Hezbollah, and how they justify a lot of things that are normally very much banned in Islam. So that's a long-winded way to say that, yes, religion does play an important part of the conflict. One of the most shocking things for me this year was they did, I think it was like a month after October 7th, there was this intense, what do you call it, study that was done on the opinions of Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And it was basically about what to them made, because most Palestinians felt October 7th was justified. That's undeniable. And so, like, a lot of these stats were kind of to try to figure out, like, why did they think it was justified? And I don't know if someone has a link to these stats, if you know what I'm talking about. Lonerbox and I kind of went through them privately in a call once, and we were both kind of shocked reading through some of this. Because it just showed how much we had projected our Western mindset onto a totally different group of people with different values, and all that kind of stuff, particularly religious values. And so if I just want to I actually want to do an experiment. Okay, if I were to give a bunch of options, so why Palestinians felt October 7th was justified. So let's give the options right now. Okay, so where can I write this down? Okay, I'll just write it down. So option one is they were, say, upset about Al-Aqsa mosque. Okay, issues, any kind of violations of Al-Aqsa mosque. Okay, number two, they were upset about the blockade and not being able to get enough food and the standard of living in Gaza. Number three, they were upset about all the checkpoints that constantly oppress Palestinians and make life very challenging for Palestinians. Number four, they're upset about losing their homes in 1948 and all the war crimes. Or number five, they were upset about the violations and that Israeli soldiers had done to them and their family. Like, if I give those five options, right? If you guys remember them, I want to see if you guys guess which one you think won by a landslide on the thing that justified October 7th to them. Because, like, let's see if everyone guess. Like, what number? So, I'll repeat. Number one is Al-Aqsa Mosque. Number two, you want me to write them down? Okay, I'll write them down, chat. Okay. 1, 2, blockade. 3, checkpoint. 4, okay, those are the options. I put them in chat. Yeah, so let's see. Let's see if you guys guess right. Okay, there's no number 11, Alex. A lot of people are guessing 5. So 5 are war crimes. A lot of people guessing 1. Oh, Soy guessed number 3. Very few people would guess number 3. Sin guessed number 4. No one's guessing number 2. No one thinks the blockade. The blockade is what I hear leftists always talk about. They basically consider that an occupation. Instead of the blockade, I should have put blockade and occupation. But yeah, so a huge reveal is, so Twitter and leftists all tell us that the problems are basically 2 to 5, right? And that's because those feel much more legitimate to us as a Western audience, and mostly non-religious audience. It's not true. It was number 1 by a landslide. It upset them more, like, from what I remember in the stats, correct me if I'm wrong, number one, what they considered violations of the mosque, which are extremely minor, by the way. I'm telling you, it is minor. And like, even when I'm trying to look at it from a religious mindset, it's number one is what upset them. Number one is to what justified October 7th. Not the human rights abuses, not the blockade, not like, and this is one of the problems, is that, like, we're told in the Western mindset that if we just improve the material conditions of the Palestinians, that things will be fixed. It's like, according to Palestinians, that's not true. So like, the religious aspect does play a role. Because at the end of the day, Al-Aqsa Mosque is under control of Jews, which is a huge deal to them. So, like, you have to, it's very easy for us, and it's very hard for us to understand why on earth Palestinians deal with so much crap. Why are they giving this much of a shit about a mosque? But it's because we are projecting our non-religious mindset. And you might be sitting here being like, oh, I am religious. You're not religious compared to this. You wouldn't be here. Okay, even if you believe in Jesus, okay, you, like, go do your sacraments, you are not religious on this level. Like, it is not something that consumes your brain 24/7. Like, it is a totally different mindset. Trust me, I've lived amongst religious Jews. It's a totally different mindset. So this is, like, one of the reasons why you have to, yeah, I mean, as a Jew, you're not even allowed to go to Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's considered a violation. So the fact that Jews control it is a whole other thing. This is one of the reasons why Israel will never, ever fuck up Al-Aqsa Mosque, even if it wants to, because it's like, if it does, Israel will get nuked. It knows that. Well, yeah, they technically they're the custodians of it, but because Israel, it's still within Israel proper, Israel is going to be they're seen as the conquerors of their region, which for them is very humiliating. Yeah, they're talking about, like, the minor police raids, things like that. Yeah, so I think that this is where I would argue with Destiny, and I don't know if he would disagree with me here. Where that's much more of a factor right now than it was historically for Palestinians. So it's an unfalsifiable belief for many who believe in these narratives. Yeah, it's very true, Kyle. What would happen if Hamas bombed Al-Aqsa? They would somehow blame Israel. But this is one of the reasons why it's very hard to get into that mindset. I think, and this might be my own hubris, but I feel like I have a bit of an easier time than most people, and I still struggle, but I think I have an easier time just because I have experience with historical documentation and historical primary documents, right? So, and this is one of the reasons why I fucking hated medieval history. Anyone here who has ever studied medieval history knows what I'm talking about. Like, if you've studied in university, because you go into it thinking, I'm going to learn about knights and swords and the War of the Roses, okay, and great princesses and, like, the amazing battles on horses and, like, you know, it's like, and catapults. It's going to be a blast, okay? No, you get into medieval history, you're not reading about that shit. You are literally stuck reading primary documents from, like, some friar, okay? And he's talking about the details of how often you should wash your hands, okay, and which bed Friar John should sleep in, and Friar Joe should not sleep in the same bed as Friar John unless they both washed their hands, okay? And, like, and prayed 3 times a day and all of this stuff, okay? Because it's really, and I'm telling you, it is the most dry crap ever. God help medieval historians, okay? If you know any medieval historian, give them money, because they hate their lives. They're no catapults, okay? It's like, it's really boring. It's extremely dull, and those are the only sources, primary sources that we really have from the period. Lots of monks. Okay, it's always the most boring people in that time period who can read and write. And when you read this stuff, these people sound like aliens. Even though they're like they're the whitest people on earth. Like, they're like Anglican, Catholic, white people in England, like, or 13th century, I don't know. And, but they still feel like aliens. They still feel like total aliens when you're reading them and you're reading their mindset, because they have a completely different worldview than you. Because at the end, like, we're very much 2024 secular Western people. Has Eris ever talked about Hassan Abi calling Jews inbred? I didn't know he said that. I'm not surprised. I think the dude's an anti-Semite. So I don't have any qualm saying that. You're saying that there aren't any medieval peasants writing on AO theory? Yeah, there's not. But this is what I mean, is that like a totally different mindset. Like, they are just very different. Like, a 13th century monk is very different than a Catholic priest today. Totally different types of humans. And I feel like you can't talk about that without people being like, oh, you're being racist, or you're being anti-Semitic, or you're being Islamophobic, or you're being this. But it's like, these are cultural signifiers that are very important to who we become as humans. And there are significantly different cultural signifiers within the Middle East. That's just true. Not just between the Middle East and West. I mean, within the Middle East itself. And you see this in Iraq, right? You see this with you see this with differences between types of Muslims. And any Muslims in chat know what I'm talking about. There's like a very intense different mindsets. And it's hard for us in the West to put our mind there. Because we are operating with that same level. There's also a lot of very similar stuff. I've always heard that to truly understand the issues in China right now, you had to understand an Eastern philosophy. So you had to read Chinese philosophy and understand Chinese philosophy is its own thing, and read about the focus on harmony versus individualism and all these things, to understand why the concept of human rights is so strange to the Chinese mindset. So that's its own thing, but it's just an example of how, so I do think that Destiny kind of accidentally projects his own bias, because he's seeing like, what are the conditions that create this conflict? And from our perspective, it's impossible not to project our own perspective, because like, if I were a Palestinian, what would upset me out of that list of 5 are probably the human rights abuses, right? Like, that's what would do that for me. And maybe, I don't know, maybe number 2 would be the blockade if I can't get my cookies or something. I don't know. So like honestly, it would probably be losing my home. Like, there's a bunch of other things. But if you're extremely religious and you see Al-Aqsa Mosque as such an important part, that's where Muhammad went back up into heaven and all these things. It's like, of course it's going to be more important to you. Of course. It would be weird if it wasn't. I get that. I'm trying to learn about Japanese politics, and the political positions seem wacky and random, where I can understand. Yes, and so understanding an Eastern philosophy and a Japanese mindset, extremely important. And I really encourage you guys, if you guys get into any kind of topics, whether it's politics, anything that involves another culture, another thing, like, don't just think, oh, I just need to read everything that happened, right? And I'll understand it. That is a mistake that I've made so many times. You don't need to know what happened, right? You need to understand the mindset, because that's how humans work. Like, what is the lens in which they are seeing the world? And that will change things a lot. It's the same thing, like, with like extreme leftists, how they see the world in oppressor versus oppressed, and that's how they can justify rapes and war crimes, because they call it resistance. It's a different mindset. Important to see things in that kind of different layers. What do you think should be a solution to Al-Aqsa? I don't know. I mean, obviously I should think it should be respected and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't have the hubris to think that I somehow know better than all the people already involved in it. What percentage of Israelis are as religious as the norm in the Emmy? It's very small. The thing is, the religious Jewish groups are increasing because they breed faster than non-religious Jews. So that's not going to be the case for long. And this is why the religious aspect is going to become more and more important as time goes on. It will become more important. Because religious people breed faster. Muslim, Christian, Jew, Hindu, everyone, I don't know. God makes you fucking breed more, man. And so that's going to be a larger problem in the future. So you could say that historically it was not as much of an issue. Now it is. It's funny because I feel like that kind of like goes against a lot of people's instincts, because we often think in the West we have the opposite ideas with Islam, right? Which is equally as dumb, which is like this idea that we're like, as we progress in society, we'll become less religious, and that will make us more civilized. But yeah, that's not true. But it's not even the importance of Al-Aqsa. Just look at what happened to Hagia Sophia in Turkey. It's fundamentally an issue of religion. People meant to be superseded by relevant of Muhammad. With people who have that interpretation of Islam, for sure. Agreed, though, it's important to make sure that you are reading someone credible in the mindset, because you will get 200 books of people explaining how all modern Japanese people think Bushido and have a samurai mindset. That is very true. I do want to say that Wikipedia is an excellent place to always start. I always think if you start off with Wikipedia, you will be set up for success. Wikipedia is excellent. Academics love Wikipedia. People who shit on Wikipedia don't know anything they're talking about. It's a high school teacher. No offense to teachers, but they will shit on Wikipedia. It's excellent, right? You don't want to only stick with Wikipedia. In Destiny's case, it's a little different because he's trying to get so much information in such a short amount of time. He kind of has to do that. But you want to do deep dives. So what I always encourage, if like you're trying to learn more about a topic, read the Wikipedia page first, then read any relevant associated Wikipedia pages, and then go down to the sources. Like click on the sources and go read those sources.